Welcome to A Parent's Guide to Child Development. I'm your host, Anna-Marie Von Furley from Fledglings Flight. Each podcast, we strive to give parents the tools they need to help their child thrive through conversations with experts in child development and psychology, where you can learn about the most important information that you didn't know existed. What if the way we've been educating children has been getting it backwards, filling young minds like empty vessels instead of trusting them to lead their own learning, and in doing so, building the skills to make for a truly independent and meaningful life? Today's guest has spent decades proving that this isn't just a beautiful idea, it's science-backed and field-tested. Marsha Familaro Enright holds a BA in biology from Northwestern University and an MA in psychology from the New School for Social Research. She's an educational entrepreneur, international speaker, and writer whose work spans psychology, neuropsychology, and philosophy. In 1990, she founded Council Oak Montessori School, serving children ages 3 to 14, and led it for 27 years. She also founded The Reason, Individualism Freedom Institute, the predecessor to Reliance College, designed to produce graduates who think for themselves and live as true entrepreneurs in their own lives. She's a member of both Monte Parlin Society and American Montessori Society. Marsha, welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So many words I barely made it through, but but we got there. I mean, I think it's so exciting what you've been doing, from working with school-age children and then working with adults now. But I want to set some groundwork for people. Montessori is such a popular idea, a concept now, but I don't know that most parents know what it really means. They might just associate with the style of classroom decor rather than like a true educational philosophy. At its core, what is the Montessori method really about?
It's a deeply scientifically based educational philosophy discovered by Maria Montessori, who was the first woman doctor in Italy. And she started it because she was working in a clinic that had autistic and retarded children, and she wanted to make things better for them. And she noticed that they spent a lot of time playing with their food. And she realized that was because they were so deprived of any other stimulation in the environment that the food was the only thing that was really interesting. So she went back and she studied all of the educational theorists of the 200 years before her. This is like 1890. And she started making what she called materials, which are like games, but they teach you concepts. They teach you language, math, history, and all these things. And she used them with the children in the clinic. They did so well, they learned so well with this that they passed the state exam for normal children after a year. And everyone was raving about this, but she was thinking to herself, well, if these poor children can pass the state exam, what are children that don't have any problems learning? Are they learning what they need to learn? Excuse me. And so she was a lecturer on anthropology and other things, and was famous because of what happened in the clinic. And a few years later, some businessman who owned an apartment complex in a very poor section of Rome, excuse me, that had factory workers, and they were going to work every day, and the children were staying home and vandalizing the building. So they went to her to start a school for these children. Now, these children were extremely deprived. I mean, they came from illiterate, innumerate families from the country that didn't know how to do most of the things that people in the city knew how to do, keep themselves clean and all this. So she had just a room. She didn't hire a teacher. She hired a very nice woman, and they put the materials in the room. I'm sorry. And there were a lot of wealthy women involved in this whole project. So they bought a lot of toys too. Well, it turns out that the children, when they got into the room, were not interested in the toys. They were interested in the materials because there was so much to learn from them. And she measured all the children in terms of their height, their weight, and all that kind of thing biologically when they started, and then after 4 months. And the children became noticeably healthier after 4 months working with these materials, working in the school, even though they didn't change their diet or anything like that, which is interesting. See, Montessori was a scientific genius and very tuned into biology. And she realized it was related to the fact that if the mind is getting what it needs, getting the food that it needs, the learning that it needs, it makes the whole body feel healthier, right? So anyway, she worked with these children, and she would see them every year. She would come in every week to see how they were doing. Even when the school was closed for a holiday, some people came by to see it. The children on their own went and opened it up and demonstrated to the people who came how they did their work on their materials. They loved the work so much. And this is really typical of Montessori students even today. Montessori spent 50 years developing her whole system and spreading it around the world. She became almost instantly famous because of this school. It's called the School of San Lorenzo. And people came from all over the world to study with her and then bring it back to their countries. And to this day, the children in a Montessori school love their work so much that, for example, I got many letters over the years from parents who said, my child loves school so much that when he's sick, he lies to me so that he won't miss school. And that's because, right? Where do you hear that? That's because the way she figured out the materials, the way to set up the classroom. The classroom is set up with low shelves all around the classroom. The materials are organized according to their subject matter and order of difficulty. And the children can work at a table, they can work on the floor, they can work with other children, or they don't have to work with other children. They're each doing their own work. They get small group lessons from their teacher, and the teacher does a lot of observation of each child to know where that child is in terms of their abilities, their interests, and where they need to move next in their learning. And then she'll bring 3 or 4 children together and give them a small lesson, and they can do that work afterwards, or they can do something else. When they come in the morning, they decide what order they're going to do their work. They might do their math first. They might have a snack first. There's a whole section in the classroom called Practical Life in which they learn how to do things like what's the proper way to sweep the floor? How do you wash dishes? How do you, they created these things called dressing frames where you can practice zipping, buttoning, tying. So you isolate the skill that you're working on and you become good at that. And then when you go to put your own clothes on, it's really easy to do the buttoning, the tying, the zipping. So as much as possible, it's the tasks that the children are learning are broken down into really manageable amounts. And the interesting thing is the materials that are in order of difficulty, each lesson, each material is just hard enough to be really engaging for when you first learn it, but not so hard to be overwhelming. And so what happens is the children get into a deep concentration on the work and they will do it over and over again until they've mastered it. And what people later realized was the children were getting into flow, which is that state where you're really concentrating, you're really engaged with whatever you're doing, and you're really enjoying it. And you kind of forget what's going on around you until you finish the task. And then you come out of it and you're kind of pleasantly tired because it was so enjoyable and engaging mentally. So the children in a Montessori class are often in flow working on their material, and they develop an amazing two things that really works well when they get older. One is they develop amazing concentration on their work and a tremendous work ethic because each child is working at their own pace on what they need to be working on, and they're challenging themselves. They're not in a competition with other people. So they are much more engaged with the actual work and they love it, and it makes them have a great work ethic because it's about what can they do? How can they independently make themselves better? So that's a little, there's so much more to the Montessori system than I can even I just touched on things right here. It's funny because people will come into a Montessori classroom and the critics will say, "Oh, it's unstructured," because people are doing things all over the place, but they don't understand their idea of structure is everybody sitting at a desk doing the same thing at the same time. They don't understand that in the Montessori system, we have a immensely and detailed worked out structure, but it's abstract, and the teacher is implementing it in the classroom. So all this activity you're seeing everywhere follows this structure of what's best for the children. And the children don't have to work with each other, but they love to work with each other. So you'll see them working together and talking. And it's interesting because Montessori said adults learn so much by talking to each other. Why do we make children be silent in school? So they can't be goofing around too much, or they can't use the materials as swords or anything like that, but they can talk to each other about what they're doing and what they're thinking in their day and how do you do this material. I mean, it's really quite charming. If you go into a classroom, the engagement and the happiness is so evident in a Montessori classroom. It's something that if you're at all tuned into that, it'll strike you in the face. So.
Awesome. There's a concept in Montessori called sensitive periods, windows of time when children are biologically primed to absorb certain skills. Can you walk parents through what those are and what's at stake in honoring or missing them?
Well, what's at stake is that it's much harder for a child to learn something when they're out of the sensitive period. So I'll give you an example that's biological. I don't know if your parents have ever heard of children that are born with like a deformed cornea. And so they can't really see well because of it. And sometime, what used to happen is sometime later in life, they might get a cornea transplant. So now they can see, but now they have to make sense of what they see in combination with the rest of their senses because they haven't had all the practice of looking and hearing and tasting at the same time and moving at the same time. So it's quite if the person doesn't work on it, they never learn to see right because it's much harder to learn this later in life. So when the young child, when 0 to 6, they're really, really working on their sensory motor work. So seeing, touching. I mean, everybody who's had a baby knows that the baby puts everything into its mouth, right? And it's exploring the world. And one of the things I like to say to people is if you know children, you know that you cannot stop a 2-year-old from learning. I mean, you really would have to beat them or something to stop them. But what happens when they're 8 years old and they don't want to learn at school? It's because they're not getting the appropriate environment. They're not getting the learning the way that they need. So at 0 to 6, you're learning how to speak, how to talk, how to understand the world, how to navigate physically, colors, all these things. These are part of the sensitive period. 6 to 9-year-olds start to advance conceptually. Their reasoning minds start to work, and they start asking questions about where is the world from, and what's the universe about, and how about living things. So they're at a point where they still need to work with materials, concrete. So the materials, for example, the mathematical materials start with beads that represent our decimal system. So a single bead is a unit, 1 to 9. Then 10 of those together is a 10 bar, 10, 20, 30. 10 of the 10 bars together is 100 square. So it's 100, 200, 300. 10 of those together is 1,000 cube. So a 3-year-old can do an arithmetic problem into the thousands and millions even just with the materials. And if anybody wants to see how it works, just go online and there are many videos out there demonstrating how what they call the bank game is working, or how to do arithmetic with the materials. But that's just one of the mathematical materials. We have hundreds of mathematical materials, even a puzzle called a binomial cube that represents a binomial equation in algebra. And so each piece represents one of the terms in a binomial equation, like a cubed, a squared b. And if you look at it, it's suddenly, if you know any algebra and you've always wondered how does this relate to the world? it represents each of the terms in the algebraic equation. So the great thing about this is little 3-year-old is learning to put this puzzle together. And then as he gets older, he's learning to the names of each of the pieces. And then when he goes to learn algebra, he has a real object in his mind that represents the things that he's learning. So to get back to this, the 3-year-old is at the sensory motor level. So that's why especially using materials is really important to work with, because they're learning all their concepts through the materials. And then as they get older, their reasoning mind is developing, their concepts are developing a little more, and they're still using materials. So they might learn American history with a timeline that's divided by the terms of the presidents. And they'll have a little figure of a president um, for each term, and then they'll connect all kinds of other historical events to that timeline with, objects and articles and things like that. So on the one hand, they're learning more advanced concepts, U.S. history, but they're concretizing it with these objects. And this kind of thing keeps it in your mind in a way that just learning it out of a book never does. So the Montessori children have very vivid imaginations and understanding of what they've learned. I interviewed recently a boy who came to our school when he was in 4th grade and he didn't know how to read. In Montessori, we use what they call a movable alphabet. She figured out that there were 2 aspects to learning to write, which is understanding the shape of the letters and then controlling your arm movement. So she made sandpaper letters so you could get the feeling into your fingers of what the shape is. And they're color coded, so vowels and consonants are different colors. So as much as possible, there's a lot of color coding in the materials to help you understand things. Anyway, he was, in 4th grade, and so the teacher was concerned about trying to teach him with the block letters, which was like the younger children's material. So she got cursive movable alphabet, and then everybody in the 4th grade thought that was really cool. So then he learned to read from that. And this boy developed a tremendous work ethic and his self-confidence. And there's a camaraderie in a Montessori class where it's more like your family, like a very happy family than it is the way in school where you have the different grades and everybody's worried, kind of scared of the older kids. The older kids are the heroes in a Montessori school. And in a Montessori school, the classrooms are organized in 3-year age spans so that you have a wide variety of materials. So children who are very advanced in something in language, they can do something, but if they're having trouble with math, they can stick with the simpler things. And the older children in the class become the mentors for the younger children, which reinforces the older children's understanding, because if they have to explain something, they end up learning it better, which anyone knows. If you have to explain something to someone, you learn it better. So 6 to 9, you're developing your concepts. 9 to 12, you're really feeling your oats about your independence. The children start doing a lot more organizing themselves. So they might have their own little store. They make their own materials. They might to sell. They might have a coffee shop that they put together to sell to their parents and visitors while they're doing all the other academic work. I mean, in Montessori school, you do all the academic work, all the subjects that you would in a traditional school and more, like the practical life. There's a lot of art involved, music. So 9 to 12 is getting to be much more independent. 12 to 15 is a whole different developmental level. Now, this is when they're going through adolescence. And the adolescent period is, I don't know if parents know this, but when you go through puberty, you develop 5 new millimeters of brain in your frontal cortex. That's the area where all the information is coming together and you're making your decisions about things. So if you as a parent get frustrated with your adolescent child that they always want to make up their mind about everything, that's because they're practicing with their new brain. And also they develop more cortex in their parietal lobe, and that seems to be related to socialization. So you know how they're so interested in socializing with each other all the time, which developmentally you could see that they kind of evolutionarily they need to learn how to work with their peers. So they're working on that when they want to talk to their peers all the time. And what was the other thing I was going to say? So they're not really, their mental set is not really very oriented to academic learning at this point.
Hmm.
And so she said that the best thing to do would be put them on a farm in which they would learn all of their subjects in relationship to the farm activities. So you learn geometry by building buildings, you learn biology by taking care of animals. And the interesting thing is in a Montessori classroom, you try to, all the materials and the activities are they try to set them up so that getting the right answer is obvious to the child. The child does not have to go back to the teacher to find the answer. An example of this is there's a material for a 3-year-old called the knobbed cylinders. So they're wood, they're different sizes, they're different lengths, and they have little knobs on them. You take them all out of the frame, and then you have to put them back. And if you put them back in the wrong place, you can't put everything back. So that way it's self-correcting. So as much as possible, the materials and the activities set up to be self-correcting. So going back to the adolescents, in learning biology, they are in charge of taking care of the animals. And they know if they don't feed those animals and they don't take care of them, they're going to die. And so this way, the teacher is not having to nag them and nag them about things, but it's a natural consequence. And as much as possible, things are set up like that. They learn history in relationship to finding out about what's in their area, what's going on in their area. And in many of these ways, they're being launched into young adulthood. So then we come to the age that I've been most recently interested in, which is the young adult, which is 16 to 24-year-olds. Now, what do they need developmentally? They're looking for their place in the world, how to take care of themselves financially, physically, how to form a family, how to have good relationships with other people. So, what kind of activities do they need to really become independent? And that's where I've incorporated a lot of thought, Montessori philosophy into what we do in our programs for the 16 to 24-year-olds. Does that
That's
answer your question?
Yes, yes, that
Okay,
was
good.
more thorough than I
Okay,
could possibly have imagined. That is so fantastic. Uh,
okay.
yeah, so I was a Montessori kid. My son was a Montessori kid as well. We weren't, either of us were not able to see it past when kindergarten began because there just wasn't
Mhm,
opportunities. But
mhm.
um, yeah, there's a lot of it that I didn't experience, past the age of 5, but I remember absolutely loving it, and my son absolutely loved it as well.
You
So
know,
I just want
I just
sorry.
wanted, interestingly, they've done studies on the children Head Start, where they put some children in Montessori and some in other preschool programs. And the children in Head Start in the Montessori program continued to excel all the way up into high school, even though they only went to Montessori preschool. And I think part of that is that work ethic and that love of learning gets so embedded. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Well, I have to say in both my case and my son's case, we both love to learn. So, yeah. So, executive function planning, impulse control, mental flexibility is one of the hottest topics in child development research. How does Montessori environment specifically build those skills, and at what age does that work begin?
Oh, it begins immediately. And as I mentioned before, the executive function is very high with Montessori students because they're organizing their own work, they're being aware of what they've mastered and what they haven't, they're challenging themselves, they're developing tremendous concentration. They can be very creative. For example, I knew 2 boys who later became engineers, but when they were in our school, they would get a math lesson and then they would challenge themselves to make up as many problems as possible to not have to go back to the teacher for more problems. So that's a creative challenge, right? You're thinking up your own things. excuse me, and the children are, for example, when they get to be 9 to 12 and they're working on some of these more outgoing practical problems. Oh, and they do something called going out, which is they come up with their own field trips. They can come up with their own field trips. They might be studying something and then they'll do the research about, okay, what can we learn in the outside world? Is there a museum that has to do with this subject or whatever? And then they will have to call up and arrange for the how are we going to get there and how much is it going to cost and all those things. So all of that, they're practicing their executive function, their initiative, their independence, and they also have, we have in the classroom, it's very considered social environment. So they learn, there's a lot of principles that they follow in the classroom about how do you behave towards other people. And they'll have a peace corner. So if two children are in conflict, there's a special procedure that they go through to allow each person to have their say in the conflict to try to resolve it. So they're getting a lot of development in that and communication in that respect, which is so important for when you get older and when you're working with people. And interestingly, there's a book that came out a couple of years ago called The Geek Way, and it's by a business professor at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is one of the premier schools for technology in the country, that and California Institute of Technology. And there was a study done on where did the top CEOs from especially the tech companies go to school and what were their characteristics. And the researchers were surprised that a huge number of them had gone to Montessori school. Well, this book, The Geek Way, the author had gone to Montessori school. His name is Andrew McGaffey. He had gone to Montessori school and then been put in traditional school. And so he was very aware of what he got out of the Montessori school. And he connected the dots with why there's so many top CEOs who went to Montessori school, because your independence, your ability to think for yourself, your problem solving yourself, your creativity is all encouraged in Montessori school.
Interesting. Montessori children are rarely, if ever, externally rewarded or graded. What internal mechanisms replace gold stars and report cards, and how does that shape a child's long-term relationship with challenge, failure, and persistence?
Very good. Well, as I mentioned before, the children are very engaged in their learning, so they develop their own path. They keep that, the 2-year-old, the baby, loves to learn, and you keep that love throughout your career in school because of the whole environment and the fact that you're getting the learning in the way that's really appropriate for you, and you're getting the ability to be self-directed. Now, being self-directed is really important when you're grown up, because are there people around you telling you what to do, what the best path is? No, you have to be able to figure that out yourself. So the children really develop that muscle, that mental muscle in the Montessori school. And what's interesting is if you think about the way traditional school runs, where you're getting gold stars, you're getting grades, and you're being compared to other people all the time. Okay, human beings are naturally very competitive, and it can trump learning. So if you're focused on how am I doing relative to somebody else, you're going to be focused on, okay, how can I get that grade, whatever it takes. It doesn't mean that you necessarily learn the material. I mean, I know lots of college age kids who took all kinds of AP classes, but if you talk to them about the subject, they don't really know about it, because they were just doing what they needed to get the grade. And that's really unfortunate. So this is how it's quite different. It's not the competition is with yourself, not with other people. And so you're much more self-directed. And interestingly, the way that competition does show up in a Montessori classroom is that a child will see somebody else doing something and look at them like, that looks really interesting. I want to be able to do that too. So it's that natural human instinct to imitate is without their ego being in the same way engaged in the problem of, can I get a better grade than that other person? They're not necessarily thinking in that way.
Right. You founded Reliance College to carry Montessori inspired principles into higher education. What does it look like to apply to this pedagogy to young adults? And what skills does that unlock that traditional college leaves largely undeveloped?
Well, there's many. I mean, one of which is self-understanding, and that's something that we emphasize in the college program. We have particular classes and to teach students about personal psychology, about how to introspect and understand their feelings and their thoughts, and just to get an idea about how to do that kind of thing, but in a very systematic way. But on top of that, as I said before, this age is really looking for their place in the world, and they need a lot of work on how to communicate with other people. So one of our mainstays is that we use a method of in the classroom called a Socratic seminar. It's a special form of Socratic seminar. It's not where the teacher is peppering you with questions and you have to try to answer them. The form of our seminar is we have text, and we use text mostly from classic works like the ancient Greeks, it might be modern scientists. The reason being that these are the greatest thinkers and writers that have ever lived. And so if you're going to develop your thinking, you have these as a model. And so we might read a selection from Aristotle's Metaphysics, and then our purpose in the seminar is to try to see if we understand what he's saying. And we have a dialogue with each other about, well, what did he mean by this sentence? Or what did he mean when he was talking about this subject here? Do we understand that? And the discussion is driven by the questions from the students. And the students dialogue with each other and say, well, he said this here, and that makes me think that. And you learn how different people reason about the same material that you're reasoning about. So the beauty of this is you are developing your mental toolbox. I say you're developing your mind into a Swiss Army knife because you're learning all these different ways that people approach the same material you do, and you're adding that to your abilities. And then you're also learning how to very civilly talk to other people, because your purpose in this dialogue is to understand what the other person is saying. You're reasoning together about the material for both of you to be able to understand it. So you're not debating the other person, you're trying to understand what you're saying, and then you're adding your understanding, and you're pointing to the evidence in the text or in general that people know generally. This methodology is amazing in what happens. I will see in students over a week where they come in and they're very uncertain about things, and then we guide them as to how to go about discussing the text. And they learn that not only do they have something valuable to say, but we help them learn how to have something valuable to say. And you see this increase over the week of dialogue, of engagement in what they're learning, of enthusiasm, and also a bonding with each other in a way that you don't necessarily see in other classrooms, which is really, really interesting. I have a young man who's about 33 right now, and he came to my program when I first started in 2009. He was 17, and then he came a couple other times, and he's said some really interesting things about the experience. He says that in the classroom, you learn how other people's minds work in a way that you almost never get a chance to in regular life. And then out of the classroom, you get to know them personally, and they talk about all kinds of things out of the classroom too. And he says you end up knowing them better than almost anybody else that you know in the world, because you know these two aspects of them. So this prepares the students for adult life, where they have to interact with other people, they have to work on teams, they have to try to understand what other people are saying to advance their common goals. It's really, really valuable. So we use that methodology. We have a program in which, on the one hand, we have a very rigorous liberal arts program. In other words, we study everything from philosophy to physics, poetry, history, but very rigorous in our way of approaching it. and including the psychological self-understanding. We learn logic, formal logic. We learn how to write. We use a special writing program to prepare you for when you are an adult. And then we also have a portion, a quarter every year, where the student will work on a research project in an area of their professional interest. So they're getting practice in they're trying out what is this area that I want to go into. Like, what is it to be a chemical engineer, or was it to be a journalist, or what is it to be a graphic designer? Because so many students go to college, they major in something, they get out and they really don't like the work. Well, this way they can try it out before they graduate college, and they develop a portfolio of work in relationship to it, and they develop a network in that profession. So if they like that profession, they already have a leg up on getting into it after they get out of school.
Oh, that's so smart. For the parent finishing this episode feeling inspired, whether for their young child or their own growth, where do you point them first?
Well, I would recommend there's two books. Let's see. There's so many things they could do. They can look at all these videos and explanations on the internet. It's very easy nowadays to find a lot of materials like that. The American Montessori Society has loads of information on its website, as well as the Association Montessori International. So those are two Montessori organizations, loads of information. Um, the videos, I would recommend that they look for videos of how the classroom runs so they get an idea. Probably, if they want to, there's a wonderful magazine by the Montessori Foundation called Tomorrow's Child, which does a great job of in articles explaining to parents what we do in the Montessori classroom and why. Um, and Go to visit a Montessori school. I think that's really important. The schools invite people to come and observe. This whole practice of observation, whether it's the parents or the teachers, that comes out of Montessori's scientific background, where she did all kinds of observation of children and then made her conclusions, and then did clinical experiments where she would try different things to see what worked with the children. And so it's a very strong practice in the Montessori environment. So go see some Montessori schools. That's the kind of thing I would recommend. Yeah.
If you could change one widespread belief that parents hold about how children learn, something your research and experience have shown to be flat out wrong, what would it be?
That they have to be forced to learn things that they're not really going to enjoy doing math problems, or they're not really going to enjoy reading books. It's not true. It's all about how they're presented with it.
Amazing. I don't know where the time went.
Yeah.
That went by so fast. I can't even believe it. What a remarkable conversation. Today, Marsha walked us through the deep science and philosophy behind Montessori, from sensitive periods to the neurological power of uninterrupted work cycles, how deliberate materials build precise thinking, how mixed age classrooms forge real social intelligence, and how removing external rewards cultivates the kind of intrinsic motivation that lasts a lifetime. The through line in everything she shared is a profound respect for the child as a capable, self directed human being, and the evidence that when we honor that, the results are extraordinary. Marsha, thank you for your decades of work, your scholarship, and for sharing it with all of us today. You can explore more of her writing and work at Marsha-Familaro-Enright.com, Council Oak Montessori at counciloakmontessori.org, and Reliance College at reliancecollege.org. There's also other links in the description. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. And I hope if anybody has any teenage age kids, that they might look at our Great Connections program, which is on our website.
Oh, fantastic. Great connections. Yeah, it sounds really quite amazing, and I so appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for tuning into A Parent's Guide to Child Development, where we decode milestones, demystify meltdowns, and occasionally question whether goldfish crackers count as a food group. Spoiler, they do. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an expert tip, breakthrough strategy, or aha moment that can make a big difference in your child's development. It's cheaper than therapy and less messy than glitter slime. We'll be back soon with more expert advice, real talk, and zero judgment. Until then, keep calm and try not to step on any Legos.